Hey everyone, and welcome to another explainer brought to you by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're tackling something that is honestly just vital. Today, we're diving into the absolute conceptual foundation for smart contract architecture, the principles of role management. So let's just dive right into it. Just to quickly contextualize where we are in the overall curriculum blueprint, we're currently in Track 7, Smart Contract Security, making our way through Course 5, Module 2, Access Control. And this is actually the perfect bridge from our previous lesson where we explored the principle of least privilege and fail-safe techniques. In that lesson, we learned we really need to minimize privilege. But today we figure out how to actually assign and manage that privilege safely out in the wild. Okay, here's our agenda for today's session. We're going to establish the role management baseline, cover primitives of ownership, look at the org chart model, build out a token contract, discuss safe transfers and life cycles, and finally wrap up with our key takeaways. All right, Section 1, the role management baseline. Let's transition from that fuzzy, abstract idea of least privilege into some very concrete code paths. So what exactly is role management? Well, it's the process of assigning privileges to named roles, or maybe a single owner account, to control which addresses can perform sensitive smart contract actions. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates how we turn the concept of who do we trust into hard, concrete design choices. Think of it kind of like hiring digital security guards, You're explicitly checking IDs at the door of your most critical functions. Moving right along to Section 2, Primitives of Ownership, let's look at the different flavors of control we can actually build into our contracts. Consider the stark contrast in ownership models here. First, you have the single owner. Think of this as a benevolent dictator. It's incredibly simple to implement, but man, it is a massive single point of failure. If you lose that one key, it is literally game over. Alternatively, we have named roles, basically role-based access control. Think of this more like a bureaucracy. It heavily reduces the blast radius if someone gets compromised, but it definitely adds operational complexity. So essentially, it's a bit more paperwork, but way fewer catastrophic explosions. So we have our single owner for simplicity and named roles for complex systems needing separation of duties. But there's actually a third, highly effective trick: temporary roles. This is absolutely fantastic for one-off tasks, like, say, an initial contract migration. You create the role, execute the specific job, and then permanently burn it. It drastically reduces your permanent attack surface because that access store only exists for a very brief, controlled window of time. All right, Section 3, the org chart model. Now, this is arguably the most important core mental model of this entire explainer, treating your smart contract exactly like a startup company's organizational chart. The absolute golden rule here is to map on-chain capabilities to off-chain responsibilities. Simply put, you wouldn't give the summer intern the keys to the corporate treasury, right? You really want to utilize a bucket strategy. Group privileged actions together, like long-term token economics in one bucket and daily token minting in another, and explicitly assign them to the correct real-world actors. You absolutely must prevent high-frequency operational duties from dangerously mixing with slow, deliberate governance duties. And that brings us to a quote you should practically memorize. Map each privileged function to the smallest role possible. This is separation of duties in action. You want to ensure that the highly active account that's constantly pinging the network to mint tokens isn't the exact same account that has the power to update your critical pricing oracles. Because think about it, if that active minter account gets phished, you really don't want them manipulating the entire market while they're at it. Okay, Section 4, building a token contract. Let's see how all of this builds into a concrete example. I want you to use your imagination for a second and pretend we're architecting a brand new token launch together right now. Here is our specific startup cast of characters for this new token. First, governance. This is a multi-sig wallet. They handle massive contract upgrades, so we want them to be slow, deliberate, and likely on a time lock. Second, the minter. This is an automated service account that handles periodic token inflation. It needs rotating keys and high availability. And finally, the pauser. These are your trusted guardians. If someone finds a hack, they pull the emergency brake. They need to be incredibly fast, but their power is strictly limited to freezing the contract. Absolutely no upgrading it or minting funds. Section 5, safe transfers and life cycles. We have this beautiful org chart, but what happens when someone quits or gets fired? Handing over power is arguably the most dangerous moment in a smart contract's life cycle. And I'm warning you right now, if you do it wrong, you can permanently brick the whole system. The crucial solution here is the two-step transfer. In step 1, the nominative handoff, the current owner nominates a new address. Then, in step 2, explicit acceptance, the new owner must call an accept function from their own wallet to finalize it. Guys, this is the non-negotiable failsafe against that classic fat finger mistake of accidentally sending ownership to a random zero address. Always make the new boss actively accept the job on-chain. So ask yourself this critical edge case question. If the minter key is lost, can you pause minting while recovery occurs? You have to plan for disaster before it happens. This is exactly why we need layered controls, revocable delegation, and off-chain anomaly monitors. Your design simply isn't finished until the disaster recovery plan is mapped out. Section 6, Final Takeaways. Let's quickly summarize our architectural blueprints so you have a really solid foundation to build from. Here's the rapid-fire summary to shrink your attack surface and maintain your operational sanity over the long term. Number 1, map privileges to the narrowest role possible. Please stop making God mode accounts that can do everything. Number 2, use two-step ownership transfers. Make them accept the crown. And number 3, align your on-chain roles with your off-chain operational practices. Make sure your real-world org chart matches your digital one flawlessly. So, what's next? In our upcoming lesson, Only Owner Functionality and Practice, we're going to transition from conceptual design directly into concrete code. I highly recommend you keep your org chart blueprints handy because we're going to be writing and analyzing the actual code-level safeguards. I'll leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Take a deep look at your current Web3 project. Is your organizational chart a true blueprint for success, or is it secretly a map straight to a security disaster? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, created by Forge College. To continue your Web3 education and dive deeper into this topic and so many others, make sure to visit us at forge.college. Keep building securely, carefully map out those roles, and I'll see you in the next one.